Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for Conversations Around the Table, Mirrors and Windows, Seeing Ourselves and Others in Romance Novels with Sonali Dev. My name is Kirsten, and together with my sister Lynn, we created the Anti-Racist Table as a multidimensional platform that's aimed at helping people bring anti-racism into life as a daily practice. We do that in large part with our free self-paced 30-day challenge. We're very excited about our new platform that makes it very easy to self-pace. We have people doing our challenge in community. We have people doing it solo. It's a great way to take an active step to bring anti-racism into your life with real tangible action. So we invite you to check that out. I also want to tell you, we also do these conversations like we're having here tonight. And when you think about why we're having this particular event, romance, anti-racism, maybe people don't automatically think of those two concepts going together. But as you know, allyship, one aspect of allyship is supporting diverse work, diverse authors, diverse books. And romance by a diverse author also gives a window into the lives of other people and experiencing other people and expanding your circle of care of who it is that's relatable to you. And, you know, at the end of the day, it can help people realize that no matter what we look like on the outside, we're all experiencing we're all sharing and experiencing the human experience. And then for BIPOC people, it's important for us to see ourselves represented. And it's also important for us to experience joy and to get lost in a good book. And you will definitely do that with Sonali Dev's books. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn, who is going to do our land acknowledgement.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight at the Anti-Racist Table. I would like to start our time together with a land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement is inspired by Ruth King. She's an African-American mindfulness practitioner, and she inspires us daily. I'd like to call on my ancestors to stand with me as I acknowledge the native custodians of this land that I sit on. Washington, D.C., that's the colonizer's name, but it's the land of the Anacostan people, the Piscataway people, and it's the Anacostan land. Those people that are named, unnamed, known, past, and present. We honor all traditions and traditional custodians of this region, and we recognize their continued connection with this land, with this water, and with this community. We pay respect to the earth, whose generous resources sustain us every day, and we pay respect to the enslaved African people of this land who were brought, held, and sold here, and all of their descendants, and all of the people throughout the world that are living in captivity. We pay respect for their spiritual labor, and we pay respect to our ancestors whose unwise relationship to race and racism we have inherited. We pay respect to our teachers and elders, past, present, and emerging, and to the young people today who are teaching us. We honor this gathering, everyone here, and especially our guest, Sonali Dev, for being with us and to share her gifts that she has. We're very appreciative. And we recognize that we all share an aspiration to be free in heart, mind, and body. Ashe, here ends our land acknowledgement.
Thank you. And with that, I am going to introduce our guest, Sonali Dev. USA Today bestselling author Sonali Dev writes Bollywood-style love stories that let her explore issues faced by women around the world while still indulging her faith in a happily ever after. Sonali's novels have been on Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus Best Books of the Year lists. She has won the American Library Association's award for Best Romance, the RITA Reviewer Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, multiple RT Seals of Excellence, is a RITA finalist, and has been listed for the Dublin Literary Award. Shelf Awareness calls her, quote, not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today, end quote. She lives in Chicagoland with her very patient and often amused husband and 2 teens who demand both patience and humor and the world's most perfect dog. You can find more about Sonali at sonalidev.com. And we're going to be talking about, these are her 2 most recent books from the Rajes series. And behind me, we have her other 4 books. And there you have them up there on the screen. So with that, we are so excited to have Ms. Dev. Welcome.
Oh, let's put your,
there I am.
there you are.
Thank you so much, Kristen. That was lovely. Thank you, Lynn. That that was really fabulous. The land acknowledgement. I was telling Kristen that I've never done one, but I'm so glad to be able to do one today. And basically, all I can say is that I found out today that the original custodians of the land I'm on were the Kickapoo, and I'd like to pay my respects to them.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. We, you know, I have to tell people to kick this off that I read Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, and I loved it so much, and I couldn't wait for this book to come out, and I pre-ordered it. And then George Floyd and the racial reckoning happened, and this book came around that time, and it sat on my bookshelf. Lynn and I started with the anti-racist table. That seed began germinating, and when I finally, several months later, after reading nothing but anti-racist books and things about African-American history, and just really immersing even further in the history and what's going on, your book was calling me, and I listened to the call, and it just has everything that I think people want in a book. It's got family, it's got food, it's got relationships, it's got journeys, it's got love, it's got hope, it's got challenges. So with that, can you introduce this series to anyone who's watching who hasn't read the books yet?
So the simplest introduction to it is that I had this lifelong dream of, it's several things coming together for me as a writer, but I had this lifelong dream of retelling, or rather, writing stories inspired by my 4 favorite Austen novels, which were Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma. And I've always, I don't even remember how far back this goes, but I've always kind of fancied myself, even before I was writing, professionally, I fancied myself doing this thing where I wrote these 4 books under one story universe, under one story umbrella. Because when you read Austen, and if she has the kind of impact she had on me growing up, then there's that whole universe that you live in. And I kind of wanted to translate that into our lived experience today. So that was one piece of it. And then, I had, so when I started thinking about it some more, the themes that she was talking about relevant to her time had a lot to do with class and female agency and self-worth for women, which was a thing that the universe around her did not at all reflect, right? So what is that, what are those divisions today? They're not the same that they were in Regency England, but they certainly still exist. And what are those? And do we today, can we, even today as women, have we owned the self-worth that some of her heroines, showed back then? So it was all of this going on. And so it became about, it became a little bit about exploring privilege. And to do that, I kind of actually checklisted all of the, wheels of privilege that put you higher and higher in today's world. And so, there's generational wealth. So there's wealth, but there's generational wealth. There is, royalty, which is, again, a part of generational privilege. There's brilliance. So there's the genius level, brain. There is education. There's political ambition. And so this kind of descended from royalty, Indian American immigrant family was born, and I call them the Indian Kennedys, but they are politically ambitious, which is the next step in making a place your home. So it became a lot about owning a place as your home and letting it own you, which is the other half of it. So that kind of is the series, and the first one is a gender flipped Pride and Prejudice. And then Recipe for Persuasion is a generational persuasion. And I'm sure we'll talk about that some more.
Yeah. And, I feel like because you brought up the influence of Austen, that, in the behind the book essay, you talk about that influence. And I just want to read this section because I think it's just really gets at kind of the heart of what we're trying to do at the Anti-Racist Table in terms of our common humanity and, how it is you can see your own life and these themes in Jane Austen's material and how that's relevant to us today as we try to move forward collectively, as people who love and care about each other, even when we're not all the same on the outside. And so you say here, the fact that I can relate so viscerally to Austen's heroines is bizarre, even ironic, given that her heroines lived in a time when her country had enslaved mine, while proliferating the theme of, quote, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet, end quote. But then that's the genius of Austen, isn't it? Her themes and conflicts are so human, they cross cultural boundaries, and they haven't lost any of their relevance over time. The privilege people are born into and take pride in, and their prejudices might have altered in how they present, but the underlying motivations and failings themselves have remained unchanged. To me, Austen's books are about the work we have to do to navigate social pressures and rise above conditioning in order to find happiness. Familial, societal expectation versus free will is a theme I've tried to explore in all my writing, especially through the lens of being a woman. So with that, I think, is a perfect segue to the topics that you in this series, well, really in all of your books, that you tackle really hard issues with racism, with patriarchy, with, we have child brides, we have immigration. So can we just talk a little bit about, how you're able to kind of do that, but still weave it in a way that is compelling and people want to read it, it's engaging and it's interesting?
First, thank you. that is what I hope to do, but without succumbing to poverty porn. So it's the thing that has always bothered me as a reader, as an Indian American person, is that every commercially successful narrative about being a South Asian immigrant in America or in the Western world is laced with so much pain. Now, that is not an inaccurate description, but that is a fraction of the description. As a culture, as a people, like all cultures and people, pain is only a small part of our existence. There is a great amount of joy, almost over the top emotionality. There's a lot of fun. There's so much more to us. And even the pain narratives are not restricted to how it's seen, where, Indian woman, persecuted, oppressed in a very specific way. Sure, we are, there's a lot of, the patriarchy is very overt in certain cultures, but that doesn't mean that it's sometimes almost, I think, having overt patriarchy or overt oppression is visible. And so it's almost less insidious than when it's so silent that it's there, but it's so easy to deny, right? We've seen this in past elections. We've seen this in so many little ways that it's very much present across the globe, right? It's not gone away. I mean, of course it has improved, but it's improved in the East too, right? Because we're all fighting every day. And so when it's invisible, it's easy to deny. And therefore, nobody's fixing it. Whereas growing up, there were actually such overt issues that people couldn't deny it. And so in my lifetime, I have seen how families have changed how they treat daughters. That change has, marriage and what a place of a woman is in it. Little things have changed over time because it was visible. So while there is oppression, I think that it is much more nuanced and much more universal than what traditional narratives coming out of South Asian culture have been. And that has always bothered me, right? I mean, there's this very consumable by the West pain, which almost has this, oh, you sad people, like, let me put my sympathy out for you. And I always knew I was not going to, that was not a path I was going to go down. So I was, while I wanted to not look away from things that are wrong, obviously, it was also about making a point of how that is one fraction of the experience, and the other fraction of the experience is joy. And is this is this ability to love, all the things that are normal, the ability to fight for what you want, all of that. And so I wanted to focus on that. And so that's kind of, it was never even a question.
Yeah, I feel like, your work is so layered in that respect, in that, there is the family, you have the food, you have these things, the community, and then you have these struggles, which I think are very relatable. And that's the universality of it, is that, and it's like, if you take, for example, your most recent book, and Recipe for Persuasion, I'm trying to remember, it's Ashna. No, yeah. Who is trying, like, she sort of has abandoned who she really wanted to be, because she's trying to fulfill either what her father wants, or, I think that's universal, of people trying to be what other people want them to be or expect them to be. And so you weave that in, and it is, one thing I love about your work is, I think in the beginning, you notice, yes, these are Indian people, there are biracial people in here, there might be in a culture or a place that I've not visited or have that familiarity with it, but you get so caught up in the story that it's not then about, oh, they're just Indian, it's about them as human beings. And I think maybe that ties back with, how it is that Jane Austen's material can speak to us, that we can find, these kinds of connections in work, in books, that might be about people who are different.
Yeah, and I think with Jane, in that world, she was trying to say that even though I'm a woman, I'm worth something, right? Even though I'm not, I don't have an income of £5,000 a year, I'm worth something. So even though society believes this gives you worth, when I don't have it, I have something. So there was almost that whole, just norms aren't absolute thing going on. And so in that sense, I think she endures. Of course, there's colonial things, and of course there is its own caste system that is very much in play. This is still the gentry, right? There are flaws, but at the heart of it, and we're evolving. So 200 years from now, there's going to be flaws in all the writing that has happened now, because hopefully we will have grown so much more. But the humanity of it, I think, is what I'm trying to speak to. And as a person, as a and I hate saying diverse author because that really doesn't mean anything, because diverse is not a thing. So, diverse is not, it's a strange label that has become kind of this dog sticking for something. But, as an author of color and as an author of of a culture that is different from mainstream white America, it's, there are so many roadblocks to, and all of them to do with perception of what, of how much of the sliver of that market is available, right? So there's so much of the, there can be, how many Indian romance authors can each publisher have? Like, there's a lot of those, those glass ceilings and brick walls that we're hitting, and so it's very easy to say what will sell, right? That becomes, because publishing, as they will tell you over and over again, it's a business, right? Yeah, sure, I know it's a business, but it's a business that has been run a certain way for 200 years. Therefore, it has created norms. So almost in this ironic way, it's, those norms are not real, right? Those norms are real in a practical sense that, yes, this is how much money comes in, but those norms come from a place of a mold in which things have been set. So if we don't start to kind of unmold that, then that norm continues to be real when it's really not. And so I think a lot of a lot of the content doesn't come out is because the fear of failure is automatically thrust upon people who want to tell a story that automatically feels foreign. And I know, I've completely traveled away from the question you've asked, but I have the number of times that I encounter people saying, the check boxing, where I've read one Sonali Dev, so my job of reading a South Asian romance is done. Or, if I've read Sonali Dev, I don't have to read Sarah Desai, and I don't have to read Sulekha Snyder, because, I've read an Indian book. So, so we are, there's the stories we want to tell. There is the market, and there's all that stuff happening together.
Right. I have a question for you, Sonali. Was it hard for you to be able to kind of write the book that you wanted to write? Or like with, publishing, were you able to kind of be vulnerable and like share the story that you wanted to share? Or was it, difficult just in terms of like the editing of, what they felt was going to be sellable and in fashion, or what wasn't? Did you experience any racism in that kind of, just,
yes. And
was it difficult?
So I have been, and I think that's what I was kind of trying to get at. And there is huge, gratitude to be paid to women like Beverly Jenkins, Brenda Jackson, Nalini Singh, everybody who for a decade before this became a hashtag, were doing this work, and we kind of stand on their shoulders. So first and foremost, and even back before them, they stand on someone's shoulders, but almost not. It's like they came into this vacuum, right? And so we are able to do more with less compromise for, which is not to say that these women compromised, but it's one step, right? And so I have been very fortunate in that I have only thus far, and I have 7 books out, and an 8th one I'm writing. I have thus far never written something that is not my whole heart, right? And that is a huge thing to be able to say. There's very, like, I have people who, writers who are watching, who will roll their eyes and say, just you wait until you've written more, right? Because I even had, a marketing person that I was talking to, and I said to her, it is impossible for me to identify which is my favorite book of all my books, because I love them. You can't get me to, I can't identify which, and I only have 2 children, and I can't identify which one is, I love more. And it's the absolute truth. It may not be true of all parents, but it is absolutely true of me. And I feel that way about my books. There is something, and actually there's everything. I love everything about my books because so much went, of me is in there. So I've not had to, I've never had to do that. I've never had to compromise on the story I want to tell. And I've been very, very blessed with my editors because I think it comes to that in the end. In fact, A Distant Heart is my only book that is set entirely in India. And I remember this moment when my first editor was Martin Bureau, the most, he was absolutely a dream first editor, because I would say, there's a child bride who's run off to America, and he'd be like, fabulous. And, I'd say, there's a camel giving birth. There isn't in any of the books, but if I had said it, he would be like, oh, that sounds like, that's great. And so he was a dream editor, and my new editor is exactly like that. But I remember this moment when Change of Heart was going to come out, and I was kind of trying to, because I had talked to my agent, and she's like, run this by him, because I was, this is entirely set, and all my other books are, set across, are set primarily in America, and this was going to be a book that's entirely set in Mumbai. And so we're walking, going to lunch in New York City, and we're actually, I remember telling him as we're crossing the street, and I said, I said, Distant Heart is going to be entirely set in Mumbai. You think that'll be okay? He's like, yeah. And then he just switches to like what the other thing that we were talking about. So it was, never a question. My editors have always trusted me with my stories, which is not to say that other kinds of, racism has not happened. I mean, the biggest is when I was trying to sell my book. The first one the first one that I took out on submission was The Bollywood Bride. And you've read it, it's literally like an intra-family story almost, right? Mm-hmm. And I've had editors look me, straight in the eye and say, I don't think that our readership, and this was, to be fair, 2010, now, thanks to so much, so much advocacy that has happened since then, an editor would first be afraid to say that, and hopefully has also learned that that isn't the right thing to say. But I've had them look me dead in the eye and say, well, our readership, I don't know if having 2 Indian characters would work for them. So can you change one of them to being white? Absolutely. I'm like, have you read the book? So, this particular book, no, he's literally like, they are family. So it's, not in a creepy way, but in a
right.
So yeah, I'm sure. Then there are, it's little things like getting the Walmarts and the Barnes and Nobles and the Targets and, to stock your darned books, right? It's such an uphill battle. It's such an uphill battle because, there is so much of the, we have 1, 2, 3 diverse authors already on the shelves. If X books sell, they want to stock X minus 15. Like, this is a very, very complicated systemic thing. And I think we've spent a lot of time focusing on the publishing end. So the editorial end where publishers are starting to see the value in this, and they're starting to see what was wrong. But I think the distribution end of it is still completely numbers focused, and the numbers are systemically, telling truths that are lies.
So have you seen much change? Yes, that was really interesting. Have you seen much change since, the racial reckoning, in terms of the distribution or any of these issues, or even your demographics of who's buying your books? Have you seen any change?
So people ask me all the time, are you read more by Indian women? Are you read more by, I don't have access to that data, which is kind of terrible, but also I don't really care, because I'm writing these books, which is it's just where I want to be when I'm writing my stories, telling them, right? Mm-hmm. I don't want to tell my stories to an Indian audience or a South Asian audience or a white audience or, or a Black audience or anything. I want to tell it to all of them, right? This is a story that I want to tell. And so I'm not even really bothered that I don't get that broken down data. It might be smarter as a business person to get it. And that is the job of my publisher and my agent and the like. But while I don't focus on that, I mean, I would, of course, like there is no question about where we were in 2010 and where we are today, because you're starting at zero. When you're starting at zero, one is great growth, right? One is 100% growth, and two is 200% growth. So you're starting from scratch, and I mean, just look behind you, right? 10 years ago, there would have been 2 books there, and today you need to choose what you would put out there. Now, having said that, if you were choosing from white authors, then you would be buried under the pile of books, and and your building would be buried under a pile of books, but only your back shelf is buried under these books, but that is more than one book. And so so of course, and that is a lot of work from a lot of authors, some of whom have had to almost be angry enough and vocal enough to even destroy their own careers, and so it's been a pretty I think brutal fight, but I think we're seeing results, right? We are seeing results, and they're kind of lined up behind you a little bit right now. So, and then there's the whole other digital publishing arena, which did a lot toward shaking this whole thing up.
Yeah, well, that's, oh, go ahead, Lynn.
About just the idea of like knowing your narrative, knowing your personal culture, your ancestral lineage. That's something that we really feel is important for all people to get connected with and celebrate their own history and their people. And so certainly in your books, you can tell that the culture is just so rich. There's, you have such a connection to your heritage and to your people. How was it for you to kind of connect yourself to your ancestral, legacy, and to bring that story, onto paper, and even to kind of pass it on to your children? Like, what is that process for you as a woman and a mother? And
that's a very, very complicated question, and that becomes an even more complicated question in a culture like India, which has a long history of pretty dark separation, right? It has the caste system. It has patriarchy that can get really brutal, and so I can only answer from this place of privilege, right? And from that place of privilege, all I can say is that I do my best today, which is not to say that that is my best, right? I'm also learning every day, and there are mistakes, sometimes, and there are, but I do try 100, like 100% of my effort is to never harm, right? That's the first thing, is to never have a narrative that follows any kind of systemic norm of harm. And one part of that is being conscious of that. Having said that, when you're writing, like when I'm writing the Rajes, I'm writing Indian royalty. It would be entirely inauthentic for me. I'm writing privilege, right? That is, but I hope that I'm not writing it from a point of view of it being something that my characters have earned. So my characters are very conscious of the fact that of what that is, what their privilege is, right? And so just putting it in that space, for one. So having said that, coming back to answer your question, India is, no culture is a monolith, but India is, it's really hard to even explain how much it is not a monolith. It's a freaking mosaic of, of just gargantuan proportion, right? It's like, it's every religion has subsects, every language has dialects, every region has and intersections in ways. So if you took a character and you drew a graph they would, they have religion, which again breaks down. They have, they're on a spectrum of how anglicized they are because of colonization. And that is one kind of, that is a huge, huge scale of privilege in Indian life and Indian society, how anglicized your accent, all of that. So little things. I mean, skin color, last name, language, what kind of, what diction to your language is. And again, there's diction, subdiction, so it is this absolute melting pot of so many aspects, right? That in a character, for you really to be to do it authentically, own voices is the only way to get it really right. So if I'm writing a person, but then that would really just restrict me to writing a girl, born to of military family, coming from 3 generations of XYZ, grown up in this part of Mumbai, gone to this private English school. But that's not the only perspective that I want to have in my books. So when I'm expanding that perspective, then for that authenticity, some of it is ingrained in me because I've grown up with culture around me that's different than mine, right? So step 1 is writing someone who's exactly like me. Step 2 is writing my best friends, which is very different from my own regional background, writing her because her mom speaks to me in her language growing up, and so I'm in and out of her home. So there's all these levels. But as I'm gaining more confidence in my own craft, and my own confidence in my own responsibility to wanting to tell stories authentically, then I've been trying to expand that. But to give you an example, I recently had someone pitch me a story, and there was a very generic Bollywood-y name, right? And which is generally a Punjabi last name and a pronounceable first name. And I asked this person, I was, that, is there a particular reason why this character is Punjabi? And she said, no, that last name just feels, feels like it's the character. And so I try to keep away from general Indianness. And of course, there is a general Indianness, right? I mean, when I meet another Indian person, there's just automatically the amount of translation that needs to be done goes down, compared to if I meet someone. But then if I meet another writer, then on that plane, there's less translation. So we have all these planes on which we're operating. And so having said that, I try to keep culture very specific. So, which I think is what I like to read. So even when I'm reading, I always give the example of Kristen Higgins. When you're reading her book, there is a very specific, her New England books have a very specific New England culture to them. They're not generic whiteness. And I don't like reading generic whiteness any more than I like reading generic Indianness. So it's what I like in my books. I want to feel like I visited this particular family in this particular community, and this person who has been raised with these particular influences is here. So then I can really get into their skin and I take something away from it. So it's, I think just keeping away from generic anything is something that's really important to me.
I love that you dig in, on hard issues in Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. There's an encounter with the police, and DJ, of course, is half Black, and there's an interaction there. So you don't shy away from very realistic issues and scenarios that are part of our present day world. And then, for example, in the Bollywood affair, you highlight colorism with Samir, how he's half white, and how he looks and how he's treated, and the advantage that he gets. And then also with Caste in A Distant Heart, Raul's father, wanted out wanted something more than the station that he was born in, and you explicitly say that. So, you know, how important is it for you to include things like that?
You know, as a storyteller, that's life, right? That is essentially what we're writing about. You know, the aspirations, the anger at how we're seen. A lot of, I think, my themes are that when we see a person, we see holographic projections of our own mind, right? Everyone is, as soon as you know, the number of times that, and I know we all have these experiences, the number of times I'll say something and everybody's like, I totally did not expect that to come out of your mouth. Because you're expecting your stereotype of an Indian woman of a certain age, right? And so it totally blows your mind, right? I mean, it's, and that's all of us. And it's something we all have to try to change, but it's a very interesting thing to dig into in story. And Pride and Prejudice, the original and every version of it, and certainly Pride, Prejudice and other flavors, is, I mean, that book was called First Impressions, right? That was its original title when Austen first wrote it. And then it was published under the title Pride and Prejudice. But that's what it's about, is that, you know, when you see somebody, you're not seeing that person, right? It's you have expectations, and then something they do just feed those expectations, and then, you know, you're then it's all a holographic projection of their own mind. And so just in terms of story, that's a very interesting thing to do. But it's also, as an immigrant, that's a very that's a day-to-day part of your life, right? I don't sound like everyone else. When I generally walk in a room, I don't look like everyone else when I generally walk in a room. You know, there are so many things that stop people and say different, other, right? And so automatically over 25 years of being an immigrant, you develop this inbuilt, almost this inbuilt mechanism to walk into a room like that, but walk out of it having fixed a lot of it. So you know, I mean, I realized a few years ago that is part of being an immigrant, or that is one experience of being an immigrant, certainly mine, where you are constantly working to translate yourself, right? And and growth is, you know, works differently for different people. There are people who are like, okay, you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. And there are people, now I really know how to do this. And so this is a fine art. So that creates character. So if you saw me as a character in a book, those are the things, you know, that is the growth arc. That's what I'm digging into, right? And so so that naturally being a day-to-day part of my life, and I see myself and all my friends and my family deal with it a little bit differently. And so that is such an interesting thing to me, just as a personal thing. And so naturally it shows up, you know, in my work. Just like building community, right? Building community is a day-to-day part of my life. And, you know, and building home away from home, constantly struggling with what it even means to belong. You know, what does that mean? What is my, you know, what are my rights? And I don't mean that legally, but, you know, personally, in terms of self-worth, you know, and I think each immigrant has to come to a point where they recognize that moment of ownership, where now I am off here. And there are immigrants who never do it, right? Who can never have, because it's a violent thing. It's a violent thing, breaking away from your roots. And some people deal with it, you know, one way, and other people deal with it another way. And there's a whole, you know, spectrum of dealing with it. And so naturally, those are themes that I'm drawn to.
Sonali, what would you say, you know, looking at this kind of, you know, sense of belonging, sense of community, what would you say is the one takeaway that you want all of your readers to get from your books? Is there a central theme that you're kind of wanting them to really take away?
I mean, you know, the most natural theme would be to walk, you know, a mile in someone else's shoes. It's what I want to do in anything I read. You know, whether I feel if I don't leave a book slightly different than when I entered it, then that's that was a wasted, and I'm a slow reader, so that was a wasted 24 hours, right? And so I want my readers to have that exact thing, right? Something has got to shift. If you can read my book from the beginning to end and nothing shifts and nothing sparks and nothing inside you essentially changes, and I don't mean like, big arias bursting in your head kind of change, but something in the way that you see someone, or something in how you analyze a situation, or something in how you understand it, something has to change in the reader. And I feel like that's kind of what and I don't, this is not something consciously in my head, but it is subconsciously, in my head, or that's what really makes me happy when I'm reading a review or I'm talking to a reader. That's why when you emailed me, it touched me so much. I open up that email and I'll read it because it sparked something in your heart, and that's the only reason to sit through. Writing is not nobody who nobody in their right mind will do it unless they can't stop doing it. It is very much a thing that that is not easy, and we love it, so in that it is easy, but there are times when you want to eat your limbs. You're like, what? Why? Like, what happens? Like, why am I doing this? And so yeah, but I think specifically, if you were to ask me what is the one thing I want someone to learn, that changes, I think, with each book. But just seeing other humans and something about how you see them changing.
And that connection that can be made just through that story. So we would love to talk a little bit about your process, because you are a full-time writer, right? So you're writing every single day. How are you getting inspired? How are you keeping it fresh? How are you also just like not going out of your mind at the same time?
COVID time.
During COVID, trying to come up with ideas. What is that even like?
I don't ever claim to be in my right mind. I never have been. I wouldn't do this if I were. But so I've again been really fortunate, because these stories, these 8 stories, have marinated in my head for a very long time before I had the opportunity to write them. So I sold my first book contract, and the first book I sold was Bollywood Bride, but the first one that came out was Bollywood Affair. But this happened back in 2013, and it came out in 2014 because publishing is, the slowest business on earth. But back in 2013, December of 2013, I remember sitting down and writing the one-page, blurbs of the 4 Raje books. So that was, and then I didn't put pen to paper or finger to keyboard until I think the books came out 2019, 2020. Until 2017, I didn't actually sit down to write Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. So it was in my head churning for a really long time. And of course, the first 4 books, before you're published, anyway, you have like a decade of these stories running in your head. So there has really not been, a time where I've gone, what do I write next? That time is coming. Or not, because already now for the past 2-3 years something's been churning in my head. So again, I have been fortunate in that. And as far as process is concerned, you don't even want to know. It's just I wish I could pin it down, but I think the easiest way, if you're really talking about writing process, is I have to have this thing, this fuel fill my head for a very long time. So I have to be dreaming about this, like feeling these people, seeing their eyes, and all of that happening in my head for a while. And then I kind of come up with who they are and what their story arcs are. So really the simplest way that I think of my stories is there are characters who are, something about their life is broken, so they're not okay, right? And I think this is the basis of every story. You start with a situation or a person who is not okay, and you find a way for them to be okay. right? And that's these, that's the heart of like every story. That's it. And that being okay doesn't have to be a happily ever after. It can be a reconciliation. It can be complete destruction, which is the other end. But in my stories, it is a journey from something very specifically being wrong with you to you finding the courage and the means to fix that. And then, because I believe this about love in real life, that you only let love into your life when you are in a place of wholeness. And I tell that to people who are like, I don't understand why I'm not meeting someone, because so much of the journey is about, which is not to say everybody who's single is not well, but that can, but the converse of it is true, where if someone is with someone, then that person has let this love into their life because they find themselves lovable. Only then you're going to believe the love that you get. And so that's really the journey. I think of it as a journey of a person getting to a place where they believe they're deserving of love and therefore let love into their lives. So understanding what is broken about these characters is half the trouble. I mean, is half the battle won, right? So all the brainstorming I do, all the thinking, it is what is broken. And then I know how it's going to be in the end. And then the rest is just figuring out, what are the places that turns and how this person gets closer and closer and closer to being whole, and what are the proving points, right? Because we can think, yeah, I'm fine now. But what did you do differently to prove that you are no longer that person? And that is situation by situation changing your behavior. And that's kind of my, once I've understood that, then I puke out a first draft, which is really, really ugly and really fast. And then I take that and all my magic happens in revision. So I revise, an inordinate amount of times. And then that's kind of where everything starts to fall into place.
Yeah, it sounds amazing how you just kind of shape it. Yeah, once you've kind of laid out kind of the raw idea. That's beautiful. And I love this idea of like, you have to come to wholeness to really be able to let love in and to really give love out. So that's so beautiful. I'm excited to read every single one of your books. Yeah. So we just have another question. We wanted to ask you, what are you watching right now?
Yeah.
And what's inspiring you? Who are you reading? Who are you watching on Netflix or anywhere on TV?
So I am actually doing an event with Kate Claiborne. I don't know if you guys have read her, but she wrote this book called Love Lettering, which is which came out last year. It was just really, really gorgeous. There's something very, very sweet and wholesome and tender about how she writes. And she writes at this very close lens. And I'm reading her book that comes out tomorrow, actually, and it's called Love at First, and really loving it. So that is what I'm like currently actually reading. I have Netflix. I recently watched White Tiger. I have very mixed feelings about it. And I should write notes about this particular question because it always pops right out of my head. But I know I watched something really spectacular recently that really touched me. There was this film called Sir. It's just SIR, Sir, on Netflix. And again, people have mixed feelings about it, but growing up in India, the class system, the servants and the people who employ them, those divisions are so absolute and uncrossable. It's actually this and of course there's so much power imbalance, and there's like so many points of problematicness in that story. And it is a story of a man falling in love with his maid, which is but it is done so incredibly sensitively. Like there's people who watch it and say, this is fantasy, but the way that the two characters are created, which is what all good storytelling is. It might be the most impossible in real life thing, but if you need if I have to buy it, then you have to, get these characters to be exactly the right people I will buy this, with. And just really, I think, a very, very mindfully and delicately told story. And there's something about the storytelling that is just beautiful.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, thanks for that.
And yeah, we're pretty much out of time. We want to give you a chance to plug your upcoming work now and just remind people where they can find you.
So sonalidev.com has all of my social media contacts, and I'm on social media far more than I should be. So I'm on Instagram a lot. I have a reader group. So if you are a reader and the books, discussions about the books, themes in the books, it's called Dev Nation. And I think you can do a search for Sonali Dev Nation. And it's a membership private group, but that's what that's for. And a lot of insight. It's basically just like a direct line for that. I have a newsletter. If you know my books, also one of the big things in it is food. So because I'm obsessed with food, and so that leaks in there. So when you sign up for my newsletter, you get a recipe e-booklet as a free download, which is recipes that are related to each one of my books. So there's that. And upcoming is Incense and Sensibility, which is finally Yash's story. Yash is the oldest Rajes son, who is running for California governor. So the entire series actually gets kicked off when he announces his gubernatorial run, and it ends, at the end of the election cycle. And so this is Yash and India's story, and it's kicked off by a hate crime. So, but of course, it leads to good stuff, which is not what hate crimes lead to. But I'm making a bad joke, but it's an assassination attempt, and he starts to kind of a man who believed exactly what his life was going to be and had it laid out in front of him, is totally thrown off his game, and naturally, so that this doesn't leak to the media, his sister's friend is a yoga guru and a stress management coach, and he the only person who can help him is her. And he is, in the eyes of the world, as we've seen in the rest of the books, engaged, or rather with another woman, because this is Sense and Sensibility, and he's Edward Ferris. So, which was another thing I wanted to explore, because I think Sense and Sensibility is, for me, the most flawed of her plots, because I believe Edward Ferris cheated, because he was with Lucy Steele and he allowed himself to be in a situation where Eleanor falls for him, and that's cheating. So, so not everyone agrees with me, but that kind of was, so I had to make that, my way around that. And that's
we can't wait. Yeah, someone said they beg to differ, but we can't wait to read it. Can't wait to read it. So thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation, and it sounds like you're diving right in with these hard topics and just these epic stories. I mean, I feel like these books could all be movies, and I hope that that's where this goes one day.
From your lips.
Yes, hopefully that would be amazing.
Yeah. So with that, thank you. We want to just tell people about some upcoming events we have. Lynn, I don't know if you have the screen there. We've got Dr. Rashawn Ray on Thursday. He is everywhere talking about reparations, policing, he's doing remarkable research and work, and we're very excited to talk to him. We've got a phenomenal workshop on dignity and anti-racism, and really the power to harness dignity around these really hard issues, because at the root, a lot of it is people's identity and what that is. And then we've got the queen of historical Black romance, Beverly Jenkins, coming in March. And then we've also got another wonderful workshop with one of the co-founders of Open Mind. They have a free program, and she, Caroline Meal, is going to talk about it. And it's all about creating constructive dialogue with other people. So stay tuned. And we also have our family challenge coming soon. So check us out at antiracist.table.com. Sign up for our free challenge. And if you want to support our work, you can buy us a cup of coffee. And that's it. Thank you everyone so much for spending this Monday evening with us. And thank you so much to Sonali Dev for joining us. It was wonderful to have you here. So till next time, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, goodbye, everyone.